Ladies and gentlemen, hey yo, fellas, welcome to the week. Lucky number, maybe unlucky number 13 for some of you out there this week. We're looking at the top stacks, and it's interesting this week because you can have your stereotypical stacks that look good, dominated the first 6 weeks of the year for reasons, one reason or another, injuries, whatever it might be, teams playing them differently on defense, the Bucks, the Rams, some things change. We're still going to talk about them and interesting ways to get different within their stacks specifically. But this week is appealing because of what some injuries are with Arizona, with how Baltimore is not maybe falling apart, but in ways of being not as consistent for the price tag of Lamar Jackson. With no Josh Allen, who was the quarterback one on the entire Week 12 slate. He played on Thursday night, Thanksgiving, but number one scoring quarterback, he's not on the slate, right? And you start to get these things where, okay, you're having the seesaw of Justin Herbert. 1 week up, 1 week down, 1 week up, last week down. What's going to happen this week, right? And as the colder months come through, it's the prevalence of this running game in a lot of situations is taking on a different dimension for a lot of teams, and it's creating lower scoring environments, less plays, less overall drives in the game, and obviously less usage for the passing game. So it's interesting, right? So we're going to break this down to top stacks. There's 7 stacks. We'll talk about top 5, a couple of honorable mentions, but it really depends on the type of format you're playing in. If you're playing in a contest that has 300 people in it, you really don't even need, I'm going to stack still, but you don't need to stack if you're going for an elite mobile upside quarterback like a Lamar, right? But if you're playing in those contests, you can go to honestly almost anybody, depending on what you're doing at other positions. You can get away with playing like a Tua Tagovailoa in those types of lineups, right? And pairing him up with Jalen Waddle to try and get some salary relief and then get different elsewhere. You can do that. It might not be the optimal approach on paper, but it really depends on how many people are in your contest. I'm probably not doing that in a Millie Maker and things like that. I think I'll try and find some higher upside leverage plays, but it's interesting. It depends on the contest you're playing, and so always keep that in mind, you beautiful people out there. Always keep that in mind. Now, with that being said, let's slide into it, and we can talk about some honorable mentions, and there's 2 of them. And the first one we can kind of get out of the way is we have to see what happens with, I'm recording this is releasing Thursday morning, I'm recording this later in the day on Wednesday. So the updated news out of Arizona is that you have right now DeAndre Hopkins practicing him in a limited fashion. That's good out of the bye week, but you also have Kyler Murray hopeful to play. I liked the Arizona stacks. I liked this if he was going to come back after the bye and look real good. But now that he's hopeful to play, it's a little bit more concerning that you're on Wednesday of the week and you don't even know if there's not confidence in that happening. So I'm not as excited now. Obviously, Kyler has to play to have any interest in Arizona stacks, in my opinion. They have a 27 implied team total. They're facing Chicago on the other side, which might not seem like a good spot, but there's places to attack on Chicago. Early in the week right now, David Montgomery is not picking up all that much ownership. It's the Elijah Mitchells. It's the James Connors in a similar price range picking up that ownership. It's the Jamal Williams for obvious reasons, and I agree with those reasons. But right now, you're not getting David Montgomery to pick up ownership. You have Darnell Mooney with 3 straight games of 20-plus points. We'll see what Allen Robinson's status is, but he's coming alive in his second year right now, his second-year breakout. So there's definitely run-back options in an Arizona stack. The problem is I kind of want to go with that Arizona stack of Kyler Murray plus A, and we can go into the big energy optimizer. By the way, if you're brand new here, hop up into this optimizer right now, right? The big energy optimizer, lots of different ways you can put this together. You're watching this on the 2nd of December, the 3rd, whatever it might be. No better time to get into Patreon than right now early on. Patreon is where you get all my tools, this optimizer, industry low prices. Any questions on it, let me know in the comments section. By the way, how about this? How about this nice little, if you're watching on the YouTube version, how bless your hearts, right? Now that I'm in Texas these days, bless your hearts. How about this nice comfy shirt right here? Nice comfy shirt. We got it on Black Friday. This thing, $20 on sale, like a 60% sale. We're having a good day. We're having a good day so far and a good, lively week. Hopefully you are as well. But what I was looking at and things that appealed to me were these Kyler Murray with Hopkins, right? Because Hopkins is 6,200. But of course, these injuries have been a problem, and it's a lower body injury for Hopkins. So you put Kyler Murray in there. Anytime you have Kyler Murray, you can get to Hopkins. You can get to a Christian Kirk, right? AJ Green has not been doing much, right? He's touchdown or bust these days and really all season long. Rondale Moore is not getting passes behind the line of scrimmage. So Zach Ertz, right? Those would be your main priorities, in my opinion. It's an Ertz, it's a Kirk, and it's a Hopkins with a Kyler Murray. So that's where kind of that stack comes in. If you want to stack it, I would say probably single stacks you can get away with there. But you can put it to at most 2, so you can potentially get double stacks, single stacks, whatever it might be. And that's the type of builds that I was looking at. And then obviously you can set the same exact groups with anytime you have Kyler Murray, give me one of Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, and David Montgomery as your run back, whatever it might be, right? Include Allen Robinson if you want to. But that's an honorary mention, more so for small field stuff, because I don't think you're going to see a lot of ownership going Kyler's way if he returns. Even though it's a solid matchup, this Bears defense has not been good. This is the 29th ranked overall defense. This is not your mom and pop's defense. So there's the first honorable mention. The second honorable mention, I have a lot more, I would say, faith in, right? It's a lot more interesting to me because they're actually trending upwards for me. And this is a team that has been running the ball nonstop. They've given Joe Mixon the ball 30-plus times on the ground the last 2 games, which is leading to these 25 pass attempt games for Joe Burrow. Yes, the Cincinnati Bengals, who come into this game as favorites over the Chargers, big AFC matchup, 27-point team total. This is a good game environment on both ends. So they don't make my top 5 interest early on, but they're right there. They're like number 6. They're 5A, 5B potentially. This is a good game environment, and I don't think you're going to see ownership coming in on this Cincinnati team. I mean, I have my ownership projections up early on right now, and you're going to get ownership on Mixon. He'll be the highest owned. So by playing a Cincinnati stack, you're getting leverage off of Mixon, people who own him. But after that, it's just going to be middling ownership, like 4% on Burrow, 7% on the receivers. Jamar Chase, who has not been producing, but still is expensive compared to T. Higgins coming off of his best game of the year and is almost $2,000 cheaper. Jamar Chase is going to look like, in my opinion, a really good leverage play at what is going to be a higher price point, lower ownership, and a solid projection above 17. So I'm more so interested in Cincinnati from one very specific angle. And obviously the run backs are the Chargers. Chargers have like a 25 implied team total. It's one of the best, if not the best game environment on the entire weekend. And because of how the Chargers have been playing lately, being up and down, burning people last week, and I don't know why ranking 32nd in overall passes downfield is Justin Herbert makes no sense to me the way that they're playing. You would expect a smarter coach in Staley to maybe identify that. And then on the opposite side, you have this Bengals team that's playing well, but they're doing it on the ground mainly. So Cincinnati stacks, I'm more so inclined to get to in smaller field contests because I think we can actually leverage some stuff there with a cheaper quarterback and still getting good players in the lineups. You can get to these in larger fields as well, but I think if you wanted to do exactly stack Joe Burrow with exactly one, I think that a Jamar Chase and or T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase is kind of the guy I want to go to primarily. CJ Uzoma's out there, you have Tyler Boyd, but these are your main 2 guys. I think that if I had to build one lineup right now, I would go Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, right? And then when you start to talk about run back options there, you have Mike Williams, you have Keenan Allen, of course, continues to see 10-plus targets. You have Austin Eckler. Those are the 3 main priorities from the Chargers side of it. But if you're asking me, if I just wanted to put this as a single stack with a run back, I would probably go Joe Burrow, number 1. I would stack him with Jamar Chase, and I would run it back with Mike Williams on the opposite side, right? Mike Williams is going to be the cheapest one of these players. I know he has not been consistently getting there by any means for people, but I do believe that that's leading to 1, his lower price tag. 2, it's leading to lower ownership on a lower price tag, and we've seen it. We've at least seen it this year. He had that knee injury, which is probably partially as to why towards the middle of the season you saw him start to slow down a little bit, but he plays in an offense that has thrown the 3rd most times per game this year. He has consistently now playing 95%, 88%, and 86% of the snaps, 6-plus targets now in 3 straight games. He's had 7 red zone targets over the last 4 games. Like, he's had that one nice game against Pittsburgh where he had the deep touchdown. Other than that, you're looking at 7.8, 7.3, and 8 fantasy points. So he's not getting people there, but all the underlying usage is there. The routes run, the red zone targets, his size and speed is still there. So that's kind of the way that I look at this. If you wanted to play a Cincinnati stack, I'd go for the ultimate leverage. I'd go for Jamar Chase and I'd go for Mike Williams, the ultimate leverage, as opposed to Keenan Allen and T. Higgins. Keenan Allen and T. Higgins, if you're talking projection-wise, that's what's going to look really good. A Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen is going to look really good. It's going to be like the same exact price difference as if you went to Mike Williams and Jamar Chase and had similar upside. The only difference is that Keenan Allen is going to come in at 18% owned. T. Higgins is going to come in at 10% owned compared to Mike Williams and Jamar Chase both at 5% each. And there's no doubt in my mind that nobody's going to be shocked if Jamar Chase outscores Higgins, which he's done for a majority of the weeks this year, and Mike Williams outscores Keenan Allen, which he's done for about half the weeks this year, right? Now, as we leave the honorable mentions into the top 5, I'll let you know about a player prop I've taken. I've talked about Jamar Chase a lot as a good leverage play. I've taken him over 59.5 on prizepicks.com. You see the prop coming up right now. You take that over 59.5. If you use the code SAL, you get a free bet. Free bet. Start your month off, right? The month of the giving, the giving season right here at Christmas. Start your month off with a free bet up to $100 if you use the code SAL. Over 59.5 on Jamar Chase. I have him in the 72, 73 yards range. So we're feeling nice about that one. So that is an interesting way to play those stacks. And now we can get into these top 5 stacks, and we can go right to the Chargers since we're already talking about them. And it's a similar thing on the opposite end here. The Chargers have been up and down. Again, they're throwing the 3rd most times per game this year. Herbert, if you're looking at what this matchup individually is going to look like for him, I pulled it up against Cincinnati. It's not going to be a great matchup because their offensive line has been really struggling. The offensive line is struggling, probably a reason why they're not throwing downfield as much. They don't have the time to throw downfield. Easier to check it down to Keenan Allen for like these 2-yard gains. Easier to check it down to Eckler. So those big plays for Mike Williams haven't been there as much. So that's where like the logic and the actual, or at least putting in narrative as to why things are happening, is happening, at least for the Chargers side. But you still have a nice team total. They're playing as underdogs. They're throwing 35 to 40 times a game already for Mr. Justin Herbert here. And Herbert comes into this game right now. 40 attempts per week so far is what he's averaging. So yeah, I'm going to like that, especially at a fair price point. The price comes down a little bit for Herbert. He's $6,700, no longer in the $7K range. So what type of stack do you do with Herbert here? Well, if we're talking about groups, like just individual groups wise, it's very similar to what you're getting for Joe Burrow. Like, you know the groups to put into here, right? I'm not putting terrible players into these Herbert stacks. I'm just going to go with Justin Herbert. You know his main options, right? His main options are going to be Keenan Allen. Nobody's shocking you here. Mike Williams, Jared Cook, and I would include Austin Eckler into these. He's one of the few running backs that I would include in there. So those would be the three guys, right? And you put that group into the optimizer, the Big Energy Optimizer on Patreon. Try it out right now if you would like to, linked down below. And then you put Herbert in here and you can get some run back options. So this, if like you're playing 150s, you're playing a lot of lineups, this is the way that you go with this. You end up putting in here T. Higgins, right? You end up putting in here, let's just put Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for now. I do think putting in Ozoma makes some sense as well, but that's your run back options right there. You say, I want to get exactly one guy on my run backs, and you go from there. But if I had to build just an individual stack, it depends on how many people are in your contest. If you were building out a stack today for a contest, let's say with 500 people in it, a small field single entry, I would probably go to Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, and I would run it back with Jamar Chase, something along those lines, right? And you have this type of build going. If you're playing in something that is a milli maker and you need even more correlation, you need these double stacks, well, that's where you can start to include Keenan Allen in there. Now you have the double stack. Jamar Chase will be the leverage play in the run back. He'll be lower owned than Joe Mixon. He'll be lower owned than T. Higgins, in my opinion. So that's what I do. If you want even more correlation to hit on the game environment, you can obviously then throw in a Tyler Boyd. You can throw in somebody else in that, a CJ Uzomah, just to fill the tight end spot. You can triple stack this. I wouldn't do that on an 11-game slate with the Jared Cook. Probably wouldn't do that. You need the big Herbert game like he had earlier this season against the Browns, but that's probably the way that I would go with this. If this is a large field tournament, this is probably the stack I'm looking at the most. If it's a small field, same exact thing for the Joe Burrow stack, except you're inserting Justin Herbert here. Again, this might not seem like the optimal way to play, but we're trying to win GPPs. If you were playing in a cash game, yeah, Keenan Allen and T. Higgins are the better plays for their price tags. But when they're going to be coming in with double the ownership than their teammates, Jamar Chase, who has a similar to higher ceiling than T. Higgins, and Mike Williams, similar to higher ceiling than Keenan Allen, and he's cheaper, makes sense to go to those guys. Now, as we leave this Chargers and Bengals game environment, finally, right, you're saying, I'll let you know about another prop that I've taken, and that's going to be Justin Herbert over 275.5 passing yards. The up, down week. Here's your analysis. This week, it's the up week, the patterns, right? No, but honestly, I have him for over 300 yards in this game. This is a good game environment for him. Cincinnati is going to try and slow the pace down a little bit, but he pushes the pace no matter what. The man's throwing 40 times per game. The third most in the NFL right now. This team is drawing up passing plays. They don't want to run the ball. Their running back is basically an extended wide receiver, and a good one at that, and Austin Eckler. The offensive line is giving them issues in not having time to throw downfield. That's a concern. You're hoping that a good offensive coordinator, a good head coach in general is what you're seeing here, and one that has been shown in the media to be this smart, analytical, forward-thinking head coach can do something there. Can start to set up some chips. Can start to put Donald Palmer, Monster, Jared Cook out there to set up some chips and give some more time to find the Mike Williams down the field. So over 275.5 passing yards, you can combine that on the opposite side for the correlation with Jamar Chase is over. If Chase is going for 100 plus yards, it likely is fueling, and vice versa, it is likely fueling the more Justin Herbert pass attempts. Now we start to get to some stacks that aren't as obvious. Like the two main most obvious stacks that we'll touch on are going to be the Rams and Tampa Bay. They have been almost every single week that they're on the slate. And lately, Matthew Stafford, whether it's injury, not having Robert Woods, whatever it is out there for the Rams, they've been figured out. Who knows? They're not getting there as much, although last week Matthew Stafford still scores like 26 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp misses the bonus by 4 points. Van Jefferson gets you there. Odell gets you there. So it was fine. It just didn't seem like it in real life. 3 touchdowns in the 300-yard bonus. He was completely fine. Threw a pick 6, only helped himself out to then throw from behind the whole game, right? Tom Brady last week plays fine. He just sees 3 rushing touchdowns for Fournette, 1 for Ronald Jones, and that's what's going to happen sometimes. So these teams are still playing fine for fantasy. So we're going to go right back to them, and if people feel burned by them, even better for us. But these other interesting teams before we get there, the first one is Minnesota. You're going to have this week Alexander Mattison. I would expect Jamal Williams, and properly so, to be the highest owned player on the slate. DeAndre Swift expected to miss some time. I would then expect Alexander Mattison to be the second or third highest, right there around like a James Conner, depending on Kyler Murray's status. And that's fine. Alexander Mattison looks really good. He's like a top 3 value play for me right now in my point per dollar projections. But what that's going to give you is leverage. Insane leverage if you go to the pass catchers in this game. So in this game, you have Detroit versus Minnesota. Potentially the 2 highest players in the slate are going to be running backs, Jamal Williams and Mattison. Great cash plays, solid GPP plays depending on the rest of your lineup. But if they're both pushing 20+% ownership and you just go to the passing game, you have so much leverage, because if they're not getting there, how are they not getting there, right? Or at least one of them not getting there. It's because of the passing game. So I think that if you're looking at Minnesota this week as a really strong leverage stack, I mean, Minnesota comes into this game with a 27 implied team total as favorites here. They have clear stacking options, and those clear stacking options, if we pull up the Big Energy Optimizer, are going to be, the quarterback, Kirk Cousins, and the main stacking options are going to be the number 1 option, in my opinion, every week. He's always a leverage play in Justin Herbert, and then Adam Thielen after that. If you want to include Tyler Conklin into this, that's kind of your groups, and that's where I would stop. I'm not going to be putting the running backs in there. If somebody wanted to put Madison a couple of weeks ago, you could get away with it earlier this year when he was cheaper. At this price tag, I really don't want to do it. The correlation is so much stronger with these wide receivers for obvious reasons. They get all their points through the quarterback. And right now I'm looking at this. I have Madison coming in for about 18% projected ownership, the highest on the team. I have Kirk Cousins for 4% ownership, so he's going to be a leverage stack this week. Thielen and Jefferson are around 7 and 5% owned each, right? We'll give or take a percentage there. So this is going to be clearly a leverage stack this week. So if I was playing in small field stuff, I would go with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and I'm not afraid to run it back. Like I'm okay. You obviously have TJ Hawkinson, a little bit more expensive of a tight end. After that, you're throwing darts on Josh Reynolds and these guys I don't really want to be playing with a lot of my money. I think it's okay to go Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams is the best play on the slate this week. I think Jamal Williams is still going to be underowned. I currently have Jamal Williams coming in for 22% ownership, and that's probably about 10% too low. Jamal Williams at $5,400 with the role that he's going to have, and there's no backup Jamar Jefferson, he's likely to be out. They're likely to trust the veterans. So this is a group that I would start to make. You have to set this up a little bit differently in terms of making a separate group with the Detroit guys. But if you're playing in large fields, I think double stacking, running it back with Jamal Williams makes sense. So you would go in this situation, I would probably go with a Kirk Cousins, a Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen, run it back with Jamal Williams for a little bit of salary relief. If you're playing in small field stuff, I'm just going Justin Jefferson in his insane ceiling, single stack it with Kirk Cousins, run it back with Jamal Williams, and you're ready to go. If you don't want to play Jamal Williams, I'd run it back with TJ Hawkinson then. But I think that is going to be a very interesting stack this week. This is going to be one of the weeks where you can actually, like the Packers week, it looked like the Minnesota Vikings were in play. It ended up working out for you. This week, without another insane offense on the opposite side, like you have Detroit with a 20-point team total, that's not as enticing as when the Packers had a 27-point team total, 26, depending on the site you're looking at. But I do still think, especially because Kirk Cousins is not going to be expensive, Kirk Cousins is going up against the number 31 overall defense, the number 28 pass rush, the number 32 tackling unit. This Detroit defense is terrible. Kirk Cousins is going to have time to throw the ball, which is not normally what he has behind this offensive line. And the matchup's going to get any better for Justin Jefferson. Like this is the worst cornerback core that we have seen in a very long time from any team. One of the worst wide receiver cores. I mean, Josh Reynolds off the street is now their best receiver they've had all year, and also one of the worst cornerback cores in the entire league in Detroit. So we like that. Madison again. Madison is a fine play. We're talking about stacks here. I don't want Madison in my stacks. He's going to be highly owned. If you play him in your GPPs, that is fine. Just make sure you're getting leverage off of him somewhere else in those lineups because you have to get a lot right, even more right if you're going to play the 20+% owned running backs, two of them in terms of Jamal and Madison. So I think that Minnesota is one of the better leverage stacks of the week. I don't normally say that, but I actually like Minnesota this week. Another team that kind of flies, I like Minnesota more than this team, but the Raiders are another team that's in that similar range in terms of they're going to have a nice matchup, a nice game environment, close to 50-point total versus the Washington football team, who's on a hot streak. Their pass rush is improving, so it's making their secondary look better. And you're going to get Derek Carr. The problem is Waller didn't practice on Wednesday. He's got this knee injury. Who's left after that? There's no Henry Ruggs. Brian Edwards is a straight zero. I actually do think there's leverage plays in Las Vegas right now. Again, that 27-point team total, I think there's some pretty clear leverage plays here. My number one value play right now at the wide receiver position, if you saw the clips video of the wide receivers, or if you just watched that top 10 video, it's Hunter Renfrow, right? Hunter Renfrow plays fantastic right now. He's looking great. He projects out for over 16 points for me. And the second guy I would put into these stacks, if you wanted to, would be Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson is taking leaps and bounds forward. It is the revenge narrative for Deshaun Jackson, if you will, from his time with the Washington football team. But if you're playing in large field GPPs, I would do this double stack right here. Your run back options are pretty obvious. Antonio Gibson would potentially, there's a lot of run back options on Washington. Antonio Gibson would potentially know J.D. McKissick. You have also behind there, and now maybe a passing game role, you have also Logan Thomas, who should be rolling into a full-time role, and the most obvious one, although probably overpriced, is Terry McLaurin. So you had Deshaun Jackson in that last game. He came out, he saw a season-high 22 routes, the most he's run for either of his teams this year. He played 51% of the snaps. He has now played 18, 35%, and 51% of the snaps in 3 straight games now. Went over 100 yards in the touchdown on Thanksgiving. I would prefer Hunter Renfrow if I'm choosing one, but this is where I would go. So in large field tournaments, probably only. If I'm going to a smaller field tournament, I'm not playing Vegas. I'm probably just going right to Minnesota for similar reasons, just a better wide receiver to stack with in smaller fields where you can be a little bit more secure and less risky. But in large fields, Millie Maker type tournaments, I'm fine with Derek Carr, Hunter Renfrow, Deshaun Jackson. Run it back with any of those guys. Run it back with Logan Thomas to fill the tight end spot. Antonio Gibson to get a running back in there, especially if there's no McKissick, who got carted off with a neck injury. I think that's where things start to look a little bit interesting. And based on the projections that I have for Derek Carr, at his price point, Derek Carr looks pretty damn good this week. He's going to have to face a lot of pressure. The one thing we know that Derek Carr turtles under and just becomes, a potato is under pressure, right? So that can get a little bit interesting, if you will, but in a bad way. So like Derek Carr this week is going to have a negative pass blocking advantage. His pass rush he's facing is top 5 now in the NFL somehow, right? I mean, Jonathan Allen in the front of that is looking like motherfucking Aaron Donald, right? You don't have Sweat, you don't have Chase Young, and the offensive line or the pass rush has been getting better since those guys are in somehow, some way. So that's kind of like the larger field GPP. And then you have the two obvious stacks. You have the Tampa Bay stack. Antonio Brown is doubtful, by the way, so there's that for you. So you have the Tampa Bay stack, and you have the Rams stack. So let's start on the Tampa Bay side of this one. Tampa Bay was not my number one owned stack last week. That was the Rams. I went to a little bit more Tampa Bay after we got the news that, you saw Matt Stafford dealing with injuries, which would explain why he sucked the last two games before the bye week. But then you end up getting out there, and you see that Tampa Bay's playing fine. Tom Brady's moving the ball all up and down the field. These two high safeties, he's just saying, yep, I'm going to check it right down to you, Lenny Fournette. I'm going to check it right down to you, Gronk. The Gronk stack worked out great. If you stacked him with anybody else, it didn't work out as great for you. And what happens? You see Ronald Jones have a rushing touchdown and Fournette have 3 rushing touchdowns. Those things just happen. Earlier this year, that happened, I believe, once with Lamar. Lamar is a popular play at a cheaper price tag. And Lamar Jackson goes out there, and every single one of the dusty old running backs, Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman, and Latavius Murray at the time, all had rushing touchdowns. So what you're going to get from Tom Brady, you know the obvious stuff here. It's going to continue to see these 2 high looks. And if there's no Antonio Brown, you're going to keep getting Tyler Johnson in the slot, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans on the outside with Rob Gronkowski there, Leonard Fournette in the backfield. Gronk remains the priority. He has seen a team-high 17 targets the last 2 games and 11 targets against the zone, 3 more than anybody else. That next guy in line is 8 targets, 2 against these zones, these 2 high safeties that they're probably still going to see is Leonard Fournette, and the guy after that is going to be Chris Godwin. So I would say that Gronk is my most interesting guy to stack Brady with, and I'm completely fine. I'm completely fine if you just want to go Gronk Brady stacks and just end it there. I'm personally not one to want to put a lot of running backs in there. Leonard Fournette seeing enough pass catching volume, the pass catching touchdown last week, where if you wanted to put him in there, you could. He's really expensive though, and the consistency of how often he's being targeted in this offense is at least nice enough. If you wanted to put him in the groups, you can. I'm going to go for a little bit more upside and continue to trust in Chris Godwin, continue to trust in really just at this point, only once over 4 targets in the last month and a half for Mike Evans, or 5 weeks at this point. So at this point, I'm going to trust mainly Rob Gronkowski. If you're going after this would be your groups. You can put Tyler Johnson in here. These would be your groups for large field GPPs. If I'm building a hand-built lineup for a single entry lineup as of right now, I'm just going to go Tom Brady with a Rob Gronkowski, and then I'm going to start to build out the rest of my lineup in another way. And how you would do that is on the opposite side of this, you can see, hey, do I want to play anybody from Atlanta? Honestly, I really don't want to. Cordell Patterson is the one guy who would stand out. He's priced up yet again. He's in a tougher matchup than he's ever been in right now as a running back, wide receiver conversion hybrid player. And I'm sorry, but Omedid Zaccheaus and Kyle Pitts, who has not been having success against cornerbacks at all, he himself as well, now that he's having cornerbacks on him, has not been looking anything good at all. Look at his previous stats. It's not good. So Kyle Pitts, he's going to become maybe a leverage play, although the price point really isn't changing all that much for the guy, right? It's not. So it's tough to say that that's going to be the case, especially when so many tight ends grade out similar to him. Russell Gage, sure. Is there really insane upside there? Maybe for the matchup, playing from behind for Matt Ryan. Maybe if you are the number 1 receiver. Your run back options will be those 3 players. None of them are that enticing, and that's why I think you see Brady actually coming lower on than he probably should be. And that leads me to what I think is the best stack of the week, even with Matt Stafford playing hurt in cold weather, which is not good for a bad back like he had in that game. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, negative game script, throwing a pick 6, almost threw 2 pick 6s against the Packers, leads to more of that environment. But the second highest team total barely behind Tampa Bay this week at 30.5, a 48 implied game total. They're facing Jacksonville on the opposite side, who doesn't have a good team total, lowest of the week at 17.5. You don't have to run back this game. Multiple times this year, we haven't ran back our favorite stacks, a lot of the times with Buffalo and sometimes with the Rams or Tampa Bay. When a team is projected to blow out another team by 13 points, I don't feel the need to get to James Robinson, their best projecting player, as the running back. That doesn't feel great. Or Marvin Jones or Laviska Shenault. Laviska Shenault not being targeted downfield. Marvin Jones doesn't feel great. Laquan Treadwell, who's actually their wide receiver 2 on the outside. I don't feel the need to run this back. So I'm fine just going with a very simple formula here if you're playing the Ram stacks. And by the way, if you're not already familiar with the prop that we've taken on Cooper Kupp over right now, 88.5 passing yards. He's topped this number in 10 out of 11 games, and this is probably his best matchup of the season. So smash that over, right? Over this number in 10 out of 11 games. Now there's no Robert Woods, and now this is probably his best matchup on the entire season, with still a nice game total. Projects out for me for over 100 yards. We like that a lot for him. But if you're going to this route, I think that the best stacks this week, if you're just talking about overall optimal chances of winning, maybe not leverage as much, but even then, I think leverage is probably going to be here on these Ram stacks. I think it's just a good old-fashioned single stack. I think every single one of these Rams players is going to be a leverage play this week. Because of people wanting to play Jonathan Taylor, Alexander Mattison, Joe Mixon, those expensive running backs, I think it's going to lead to Cooper Kupp, who is now cheaper, being less owned. And there's no Devontae Adams on the slate, who's on bye. So I think you get some leverage on Cooper Kupp. You're definitely going to get leverage on Odell as his price point comes up. You probably don't get as much leverage on Van Jefferson, kind of stays at a similar price range. I think the upside that he has as the wide receiver 3 in that offense, not as nice. You will definitely get leverage on Tyler Higbee, who continues to run a lot of routes. He's just 1 catch, 3 yards against the Packers. It doesn't make much sense. Their linebackers are good, finally, for the Packers out of all these years. But the man's running 38 routes out there. He's going to find himself a 1 to 2 touchdown game eventually this season. So you're going to get a lot of leverage on Tyler Higbee. You're definitely going to get leverage on Odell as his price point comes up, dealing with his own type of back injury. And you'll get some leverage on Cooper Kupp. The way that I'm going to build this lineup out is, I mean, Matt Stafford's not mobile. When Matt Stafford wins slates and he's in the top 1 percentile in the top stack or the top 3 stacks, he's thrown for the 300-yard bonus and likely 3 to 4 touchdowns. So when that happens, it is much more opportunistic to double stack it or at least run your stacks back. So what I'm doing is putting Cooper Kupp in any Matt Stafford stack, especially since Cooper Kupp is cheaper and you're actually going to get him somewhat lower owned. Like you might get Cooper Kupp at 15% ownership this week. We like that. On the opposite side of this game, I just don't want to run it back. Like this could easily be a game where it's 38-17 and nothing on Jacksonville is getting you there. So I think the best stack this week is just a Matthew Stafford Cooper Kupp single stack and roll from there, right? And if you wanted to go with a little bit more exposure, depending on how many people are in the contest you're playing in, a larger field contest, I'd go with the Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham Jr., roll up your sleeves and win the Dollarooskies. That's the Rams stack. That's the Tampa stack. They're the obvious ones. There's leverage on Minnesota. There's going to be a lot of leverage and a really nice, maybe the best and most competitive game environment this week in the Chargers and the Bengals. So there's your options. That's like 5 or 6 options that look really solid to me this week. And not only look solid, but we touch on the obvious way to play those stacks, but then the interesting way to play them. Like Jamar Chase, whether you play him in a stack or not this week, going to be one of the better leverage plays on the entire week this week. For a dude who easily has ceiling breaking like we've seen multiple times this year, upside. So there's your top stacks. Like we said, Cooper Kupp over 88.5 yards. That prop comes up. You take that, use the code SAL, get a free bet up to $200. We talked about 3 props on Prize Picks throughout this video. And now you have opportunities to try and play some bets and win some Dollarooskies, y'all. So I appreciate y'all tuning into this video. If you have 2 seconds of your time at the end of this, ratethispodcast.com/Sal. Takes you to a screen. 30 seconds, you just hit the 5-star review. This podcast is nice. It gets you into a raffle for $100, and it helps our show break into potentially the top 20 and the top 15 of the fantasy charts, battling the CBSs and the ESPNs as we're hovering around 25 right now. The reviews are the main thing that gets us forward. So I appreciate you all in advance. Thank you so much. If you want any of the tools discussed in this video, the optimizer, the ownership we've touched on, leverage, those types of things, projections, all of that and even more, a Discord with 1,000+ members, coming in to start your month of December off right and end the NFL regular season this last month or so properly heading into the playoffs. Even more sports though than just that. I mean, PGA we're going hard into, potentially news on that, on a whole nother entity coming for PGA on what we're going to be covering. NBA we have tools for. MMA, right? Come on in, patreon.com/Sal_Vetri_. It is linked down below. We'll see you when we see you, gang, and I'll see you all in the next one.